Hi everyone, JJ here with the Art of Value. Welcome. Well, today we're going to look at more super investor portfolios from Q2 2023. Li Lu and David Tepper, two quite different investors, both legendary investors, fund managers. Let's see what they've been up to last quarter. Now, this is Li Lu's portfolio as displayed on Ticker Terminal, which has international holdings, not just US holdings. So we can see at the top, Postal Savings Bank of China is 30%, over 30% of his portfolio at this point. And Bank of America Corp next, Alphabet, Berkshire Hathaway, Alphabet again. So there's two classes of stock there, Apple and East West Bancorp, which is a new holding for him. So not many holdings. He's a very focused investor. And the top position is $1.2 billion. So big position there. So over on Dataroma, we can see Li Lu's activity in the US for the quarter. It doesn't look like he's done much internationally unless it's not listed on Ticker Terminal there. But we can see that East West Bancorp, he added 20.91% after buying it the quarter before in Q1. So he's had that for 2 quarters now. And we see Micron Technology, he's sold out of 100%, just like Mohnish Pabrai did. They collaborated on the thesis as I understand it. That's what Mohnish said. They worked together on that and they've both sold out of it. So the thesis has changed there, obviously, for them. They saw it as an oligopoly. Mohnish has said that. And I would say because of the China problems, not being able to sell in China with that China ban probably changed the thesis for them. I don't know. We'll have to wait to see what Mohnish says. Li Lu's probably not going to say anything because he doesn't give any interviews very often at all. We'll have to rely on what Mohnish has to say in the coming months about why he sold out of Micron. Here on Dataroma, we can see the activity for the quarter from these so-called super investors for Micron, and we can see that both Mohnish and Li Lu sold out 100% in that quarter, but we see that David Tepper, who we'll look at soon in this video, he bought 1.4 million shares of Micron there. Also Prem Watsa, who's sometimes known as the Warren Buffett of Canada, not so often these days, but he has in the past. So Yaxman Asset Management still added to it. Daniel Loeb added 29% from his holding. Viking Global Investors and Lee Ainsley, who often has quite a few stocks, many, so their name pops up quite a lot in this Dataroma set. Now we can see here in East West Bancorp, in this group of investors on Dataroma, we can see that Li Lu's out on his own by adding to East West Bancorp and buying in the last quarter. We see Lee Ainsley sold 100% last quarter, but Li Lu is invested on his own there. He's got his own thesis and he's out on his own, which I'm sure he doesn't mind being contrarian. So he added 480,000 shares in that last quarter there. Now, if we take a quick look at his biggest holding, Postal Savings Bank of China, which I know zero about, being in China, but he is from China originally. He knows a lot about the Chinese economy and the US economy. He lived in both places. He was educated at Columbia University in the US. I've made videos about some of his history or what Mohnish Pabrai said about him recently. I'll put that in the description. But if we see the stock graph over a year, which I think he's held it for at least that long, it's down 18.5%, so not working out very well for him so far. He's usually a long-term investor, doesn't have a lot of movement, he's very concentrated, he's got a lot of the stock, but there's still time to come, and he obviously has a strong thesis on it to own that much of it. Now moving to well-known investor and fund manager David Tepper. He's had some really interesting moves this quarter, which is why I'm looking into it. He's more of a macro investor than Li Lu, quite different investors, a contrast of investing styles here. So he's got Nvidia as the top position, which is a surprise. He's added this last quarter when a lot of people like Mohnish Pabrai are saying it's in a bubble, and Stan Druckenmiller has said that it's a bubble, but he's still invested in it because he thinks it's going to go 2 to 3 years more, and maybe David Tepper thinks this too. Now, if you're getting value out of this episode so far, do think about subscribing if you're not already to get more of this kind of investing content in the future. And thanks to all those people who have subscribed already. Looking back on the dot-com bubble, Druckenmiller said that these things don't just go for a few months, 8 to 10 months. He thought it's more like these things go for 2 to 3 years, like the dot-com bubble. And he experienced that. He went through that. And he says this could go on for 2 or 3 years with Nvidia, even though it isn't a bubble. He said it's in nosebleed territory. I made a video about what he said. I'll put that in the description. But David Tepper's added 580% position here with over 1 million shares to the value of 431.5 million. And the next position at 8% is Meta, which he added 114%, and Microsoft at 300 and 76% add. Amazon next. Alibaba, he's made a huge investment in Alibaba too, to the tune of nearly $373 million. So he's added a lot during this quarter. Made a big bet on Alibaba outside the US and China, of course. He's also added to his Uber position, which is 19% up. And then Alphabet's the next. He's also bought for the first time Advanced Micro Devices, Intel Corp, Qualcomm, a Taiwan Semiconductor, which Warren Buffett sold out of because he didn't like the location of it. Thinks it's a really great company, but didn't like the location. David Tepper's betting that it'll be okay. And Baidu, so he's made a number of buys in China here this last quarter, the second quarter. Now, Tepper owns a lot of stocks. He's not a very focused investor, say like a Bill Ackman or even Warren Buffett or Li Lu. He owns quite a lot of stocks, more of a macro style, as I said. You can see in this last quarter he's been pretty into buying tech stocks, adding to them. He's bought FedEx there, which is often a reflection of the US economy. So maybe he's fairly bullish on the economy, doesn't think there's going to be a recession. He can, of course, change his mind pretty quickly. Stanley Druckenmiller, macro investor, certainly does. But anyway, there's a lot of tech stocks in there that he's added to and bought. If we go down the list, more of what he's been buying, not just adding to, we can see Marvel Technology, Broadcom, Apple. He's bought Apple. Micron Technology, he's bought Micron, one of the investors that hasn't sold out. He's bought into Micron at this time. So that's going against Li Lu and Pabrai there. Lam Research, JD.com, another Chinese stock, Chinese e-commerce. So he seems to be bullish on that. Synopsys Inc., ASML, Pinduoduo, another Chinese stock, another e-commerce play from China and getting into international markets as well, especially the US. And there's more buys there. I won't list them all. They're pretty small compared to those bigger buys, Alibaba being the biggest. So that's interesting that he's bought into Alibaba at this time. We'll have to see what happens with that. He's obviously keen on what's happening in China, even though the economy seems to be turning down. Maybe it's because China is stimulating while the US is doing the opposite, lowering interest rates to try and stimulate the economy there, and seems to be finishing the crackdown on tech companies there. So will be interesting to see what happens with Alibaba over the coming quarters. So somebody's practicing piano through the wall. I hope you don't hear too much. Hope it's not too distracting, but I will persist here. So we've looked at what David Tepper's been buying. Now looked at what he's been selling. He's been selling Energy Transfer, Enterprise Product Partners, MPLX, I don't even know what that is. He's been selling Macy's, Chesapeake Energy, Constellation Energy. So he's been selling energy companies here and buying into tech. It looks like Salesforce he's sold 100% out of though. HCA Healthcare 100%. Tesla, he had a bet on Tesla earlier and he sold completely out of that. Sold completely out of Walt Disney, Ark Innovation. That was a surprise last quarter. I think it was last quarter when he bought into Ark, but he sold completely out of that, changed his mind. Sold completely out of Match Group as well there. So those are the notable sales for that quarter for him. Interesting that he bought into those, Tesla and Ark in particular, bought into those stocks that were in a bubble, I think, and they went down low enough for him to buy perhaps, and now he's changed his mind there. Perhaps he thinks that they're going to take another turn for the worse. I don't know, but he has bought quite a few tech stocks in this quarter. Now we're just going to take a closer look out of these investors who have made moves in Alibaba this past quarter. We can see David Tepper at the top, 6.77% of his portfolio. Next is Daniel Loeb, who's also added to it, which is kind of a surprise, I think. Francis Chow bought, and Viking Global Investors both bought during that quarter. And who's reduced? Michael Burry sold 100% out of Alibaba. Bill Miller Partners has also sold out. Christopher Davis is reduced by 26.29%. We can see Michael Burry in Q1 added 100%, so he's out. I'm not going to talk about Michael Burry more today, but he's made some major moves this quarter too. Now we look at the overall holdings from these investors of Alibaba, who owns the most and who owns it. Charlie Munger is still at the top. He has mentioned that he thought it was a bit of a mistake. He's still holding it. He's known to hold long term, so maybe he thinks it's going to be okay. Maybe he thought he bought it at the wrong time, but he's still holding it. It hasn't sold out, so he obviously doesn't think it's a major mistake. Maybe he's waiting for it to go up. Maybe he's going to hold long term. Who knows? He's known to hold very long term. And then David Tepper is now number 2 behind Charlie Munger. It's Daniel Loeb. Guy Spear still owns it. Prem Watsa, Francis Chow, Viking Global Partners, and a few others there. But those are the top investors who have decent allocations to Alibaba still. We know that Mohnish Pabrai sold out of it a while ago, and some other investors have sold out too, as we saw. I haven't made a video about it yet, but Alibaba's last earnings were pretty good. There were some really bright spots in there. It'll be interesting to see if Alibaba's share price finally picks up during the coming quarters or not. It's certainly been low for a long time. A lot of people have been scared away from it because of the Chinese economy, the Chinese political situation, or the geopolitics of it, this conflict between China and the US that's ongoing. But will be interesting to see if it picks up finally and has a run. We'll have to wait and see. Now we turn to have a close look at Nvidia. It's fascinating that he bought Nvidia. Let's see who else has. Chase Coleman, Tiger Global Management, has also added to it there. Daniel Loeb has also bought into it. Stephen Mandel, Viking Global Investors, David Katz. Uber is another interesting move from David Tepper, who's added to it during the quarter. I think the company announced their first ever profit during this last quarter just a few weeks ago. And who else owns it? Daniel Loeb again has bought it for the first time. So I don't know if they've been talking, but Daniel Loeb seems to have bought similar things to David Tepper during this quarter. I wonder if they know each other and have been talking about it. Tom Gayner has also bought Uber. The last episode I made was a group of investors, including Tom Gayner, for their moves in the last quarter. So go and see that if you haven't. I'll put a link to that at the end of this video and in the description. And he has bought just a little bit. He, as I said in that last video, buys very incrementally, like a sports team, A team, B team, C team, and then increases them in their field of play if they go well. So he's just bought some Uber there. 7,000 shares, pretty small, only $302,000 allocation there, which isn't very much for any of these fund managers and not for Tom Gayner either, but he's obviously interested in the company. And David Tepper also bought Pinduoduo, PDD, and as we can see here, he's the only one of these super investors who owns it, and he bought it in the quarter. It's only a small percentage of his portfolio, but again, interesting that he's bought a number of these Chinese stocks, including PDD. Li Lu used to own PDD a few years ago, but he sold out of it 100% fairly quickly after buying pretty low and doing reasonably well out of it, but he sold out of that. David Tepper is starting to like it. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to put a video up here and in the description, if you're watching or listening elsewhere, to the previous episode I made about super investor portfolios for Q2 2023. I looked at Mohnish Pabrai, Chuck Akre, Tom Gayner, and Seth Klarman, what they've been up to in the last quarter. So go and see that now if you haven't seen that already. And thanks for watching or listening, and I'll see you in the next one.